I'm the Talking Skull, and this year I'm exploring classic first-person shooters to draw a line from Wolfenstein 3D to Halo. This week, the new console revolution truly begins. Red Faction brought Half-Life to consoles. In 2001, FPS fans had been waiting years since the release of Half-Life for any game to recreate its constant narrative through-line built from scripted events and set pieces. Meanwhile, console players had been waiting years just for any developer to rival Rare, whose recent magnum opus had doubled down on the team's idiosyncrasies. But with the new console generation fully underway, it seemed that the time was finally ripe for the console market to be graced by veteran FPS designers who built the PC scene years before. The revolution would start not with id or 3D Realms or even Bungie, but with Volition. If you've been following this series, you may be confused as to who these guys are.
But I don't care what Wikipedia says. You can't tell me that this is a first-person shooter. This is a flight sim that happens to be in first person.
Starting in 1995, Volition's Descent trilogy blurred the line between first-person shooting and arcade flying, selling millions of copies and setting Volition up as one of the industry's titans. Now they descended upon the PlayStation 2 and landed with thunderous force. Red Faction comes out of the gate strong with a grounded story of a workers' uprising scrawled across the rocks in blood. Innocents are gunned down at your feet, desperate miners lash out against their oppressors, and a rousing voice stokes the fires of rebellion.
Find the Red Faction members among you. Join us and strike back at Ultor.
Like Half-Life, Red Faction's actual story lacks substance. Even worse, after its fiery start, Red Faction's plot spends half its runtime spinning its wheels, with EOS periodically chiming in on the radio to remind you she exists. It's during these narratively stagnant sections that Volition let inspiration turn to near theft, when you disable this power plant by shutting off the 4 pressure valves. And, hold on, did y'all just sneak a Descent level into the game? Still, even without a story or even that many original ideas, filling its corridors with scripted events and set pieces produces dynamic, exciting stages. Some set a mood.
Maybe being slow isn't such a bad thing.
Others flesh out the gameplay. Red Faction keeps the pace fast, with most sections revolving around a unique concept. Here's a stage about miners overwhelming the guard stations. Here are a couple stealth missions and a vehicle segment. And here's another Descent level? Seriously? All of this juicy flavor is drizzled onto the perfectly cooked base of solid fundamentals. Gunshots kick. Standard modern weapons are fleshed out with useful alternate fires and the occasional touch of inspiration. Encounters bring just enough unique terrain to drive moment-to-moment combat decisions, and maps flow beautifully from fight to fight. Well, except for the wildly way too frequent load screens. One pillar of FPS level design that took a while to coalesce is converging branches. I've mentioned these before. They're the little forks in the road that momentarily split off before merging down the line. These branches don't make it any harder to get from point A to point B, but they do introduce little choices along the way that make the path less rigid and more engaging. Do I go down the hall or up those boxes? Do I go down this hole or into this vent? Do I take the hallway down or the stairs up? These decisions don't matter, but you still have to make them. They keep you engaged with your surroundings rather than racing through them in a trance, but never threaten to confuse or disorient you. They won't scratch the same navigational itch of certain Doom or Unreal maps, but they keep the action up in a way that shooters of the time rarely managed. If you want a masterclass in linear level design, Red Faction serves as an excellent foundation. Red Faction even finally fixes the aiming struggles of its many console competitors. This partially comes from relegating aim-down sights to the oubliette, but even the hip aiming takes advantage of the PS2's better analog sticks and some still generous auto-aim to make shooting feel less out of control. And look at that! When they start handing out sniper rifles, the scopes just work! Hallelujah! After 3 years of waiting, console shooters finally started taking tips from the PC scene. Unfortunately, toward the end of the game, these solid fundamentals fall apart in one important area: enemy design. Later stages pummel you with devastating snipers and insta-gib railgunners who one-shot you over and over and over with their Neo-like reflexes. I thought about turning this video into a manifesto on good enemy design, but the truth is, good enemies come in loads of different forms. It's impossible to put together a list of attributes that all fun FPS baddies share. It all depends on what kind of gameplay they encourage. So let's put aside my frustrations with getting insta-gib from full health over and over and over and over and over and over. Let's instead ask, what kind of gameplay do these hyper-lethal mercs encourage? Well, firstly, they encourage save scumming. This is far from ideal. Save scumming just indicates a deficiency in either the game's checkpoints or the player's patience. But even when I save scummed in Blood, I still enjoyed myself, so let's dig a little deeper. If you round the corner and spend a moment gathering your surroundings, you die. No room for fast and loose action because you have no way to outplay mercs in an open field. The opposite extreme, trying to safely cheese with your own railgun's wall hacks, works sometimes. As an occasional ace up the player's sleeve, this option offers a cathartic chance to blow off an encounter, but it's less fun the more you do it, because slowly deleting stationary targets gums up the pace and presents no challenge. But even boring railgun cheese frequently fails, so that's not really the answer either. What does that leave us? If we don't have time to walk in and react, or the luxury of patient hunting, the only thing left for us to do is spam. This is what the last third of Red Faction devolves into. Grab your best gun and spam the fire button around every corner. The generous auto-aim means you really don't need to know where the guards will be. You just pre-fire every corner and let auto-aim do the rest. Blood's hyper-punishing gameplay worked because you could reliably outsmart the mobs with clever use of explosives and traps, and because even pre-firing corners required you to spot and aim at monks. Maybe the PC version of Red Faction made this more engaging, since at least then you're responsible for hitting relatively precise shots even when pre-firing. On the original release, the auto-aim trivializes the only source of actual gameplay that the overly lethal late game allows. It's a shame because up to that point I thoroughly enjoyed Red Faction. On top of its scripted events, solid weapons, and elegant maps, Red Faction created the first ever dynamically destructible environments. 2.5D games had been pushing for more and more elaborate static explosions back in the 90s, but the polygon counting of true 3D pushed that kind of terrain deformation out the window, down the street, and off a cliff. But Red Faction had a glorious vision of a game world whose very walls bent the knee to gameplay, serving alternate paths and devastating hit sparks. Early mining levels introduced this mechanic with C4 charges clearing marked dig spots to open up new paths. From there, Volition turns the player loose, handing you a 10-ton demolition grinder and sicking you on the unready outposts of your oppressors. Dynamically destructible environments turn so many played-out moments fresh and exciting. Find a locked door? Why go searching for the key when you've got a skeleton key right here? This mechanized doofus slaps. He slaps my dad and my cat, and he's just a simple mini-boss. He's a big, slow projectile shooter in a basic box room with one pillar and an overpass. But look how the destructible environments transform his fight into something unique. At first, you're using this pillar for cover, poking out to land some shots before hiding from the retaliation. But every rocket chips away at your cover, eroding your safety bit by bit until the final moments have you desperately dancing around your last unexploded sliver of cement while you lay down the final blows. When it's all over, the wreckage paints your battle's story across the face of the room, with the crumbling pillar, battered walls, and shattered glass persisting on the floor. Breathing a sigh of relief as you take in the aftermath of your battle elevates this from a decent but forgettable slugfest into an emotional beat. The destruction also pushes Red Faction's limited multiplayer into unique territory. You only get deathmatch and fewer options than other, more multiplayer-focused shooters, but what's here plays like nothing else thanks to malleable cover and lurking secrets.
This is actually now this is cool, actually. How the hell did this not become more of a thing?
It's weird to me how little these destructible environments actually took off. There was a time when, driven by Rad Faction's more popular sequel, I actually wrote Rad Faction here. I would play the hell out of a game called Rad Faction. There was a time when, driven by Red Faction's Rad sequel, the industry seemed obsessed with the idea of dynamically destructible environments. But these ideas never seemed to materialize, subjugated by the never-ending march of graphical fidelity. Even today, games rarely let you carve your story into the bedrock. If you want to play Red Faction, PS2 discs are still kicking around, and the version available on Steam, well, Dash Faction seems good. If this old stuff is interesting to you, check out the rest of my series on classic first-person shooters to see what I had to say about Half-Life and more. Subscribe to join me again in 2 weeks when my year-long journey comes to an end.